right, we're back here with movie star Sean Dalton, who's related to both Sean Connery and Timothy Dalton, both of whom play James Bond.
Oh my God, there you go.
If I am, I don't know it.
Well, he's playing James Bond in real life. It's the real-life James Bond without the English accent.
That's right. So now, I know you've been sleuthing around the cultural landscape, Sean.
Yeah.
What have you discovered that you're bringing to everybody's attention today?
Well, I don't have much left. I'm emptying out my entire research library, so whatever doesn't go in my book will hopefully come onto your show, and I'll share it with you guys.
Okay.
Wow,
all right.
cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So this book is called Stephen Harper and the Future of Canada by William Johnson. It was released 1 year before he got his minority government, like 2003.
Uh-huh.
And I want to read a passage from it which explains how Quebec factored into the manipulation of English-speaking Canada from a...
Oh, Sean, you're... Okay.
Okay, it's a clash of civilizations, French and English. Here we go. Can I read it, or do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And then after I read it, there's another section on a university professor. And
Okay.
it kind of feeds into it. It shows how these kinds of things led up to what's going on in the University of Toronto today, and why there's certain people working for the UFT promoting these kinds of things. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
all right, so I'm going to read this.
Okay.
Brimlow was, okay, this chapter is called Crossing the Desert.
Okay.
Okay. Brimlow was a Brit who had received an MBA from Stanford University and had then worked in Canada as a staff writer for the Financial Post and as business editor for Maclean's magazine. He wrote The Patriot Game as a kind of partisan shot aimed at Canada after he left for the United States, where he would become a senior editor of Forbes magazine and a senior editor of the conservative, quote, National Review. He wrote it with wit and irony. His perception of Canada was depressing. He turned topsy-turvy all the political platitudes and pious assumptions of Canada's right-thinking, left-thinking elites. Brimlow invited Harper and Weisenberger on a new voyage of discovery, and they willingly embarked. He described many fault lines in Canada. They included the inherent conflicts between central Canada and the other geographical regions, and the struggle for wealth and power between the mainstream society and the natives. But the one fundamental conflict that he saw as undermining Canada, past, present, and future, was that which opposed French and English speakers, Quebec and the rest of Canada. Quote, "The history and politics of Quebec are dominated by a single great reality, the emergence of the French-speaking nation. The process has been slow, complex, and agonizing. There have been false starts, reversals, and long periods of quintessence. But for over 200 years, its ultimate direction has remained the same, towards ever greater self-expression, as the growing plant seeks the light," end quote. For Brimlow, the Liberal Party is the villain of Canadian history. It imposed a way of thinking about the country, a vision that was detrimental. In effect, the Liberal Party became the surrogate of French Quebec, ruling the country because our parliamentary and electoral system allowed a minority to rule the majority. French Canada voted as a bloc, while English Canada was split. Quote, "Sometime this century, English Canada lost its nerve," Brimlow wrote. As, quote, "as the Anglophones retreated, the Francophones advanced. But their movement was not simply opportunistic. They were also impelled by the seismic upheaval in Quebec society that led the so-called Quiet Revolution in the 1960s," end quote. Brimlow saw the history of the province, of the previous century, as essentially a competition between French and English to assert their nationality through the state, with the Liberals representing the French speakers, the Conservatives representing the English. But the competition proved unequal.
This is in Quebec. Sorry, that competition.
Well, Quebec and the rest of the country. It's kind of like a polite war, a polite civil war.
Okay, continue, please.
Okay, thank you. It was a nice, appreciate that question, though. But the competition proved unequal, in part because the Liberal ascendancy managed to impose a false consciousness on English speakers, whereby the latter were seduced into accepting a political vision that was contrary to the reality and to their interests. Quote, "The Canadian Liberal Party has been able to persuade English Canada that preserving the Canadian Confederation and common morality itself requires continual concessions to Quebec. The Liberal ideology, to a considerable extent, is the projection of internal Quebec concerns onto the national stage, so that Canadian politics in the Liberal era have been essentially those of a sort of greater Quebec," end quote. The Liberals had a left-wing philosophy. They tailored their policies to attract needy minorities, and I'll talk about that in this UFT professor, Dr. Harveen Singh, in a bit. Wanting protection and favors from the Liberal state, This included buying the loyalty of client constituencies with the money of the taxpayers with, for instance, quote, the bewildering variety of subsidies and incentives orchestrated by Ottawa in the 1960s and 70s to stimulate development in the peripheral regions. Just a side note, Canada spends $600 million on language training centers, $1.2 billion every 2 years. That's a lot of money.
Language training centers. You mean teaching French?
English.
And teaching English.
Yeah. Okay. And only 14% of new Canadians even attend these centers, and only 14 to 16% of new Canadians know French or English or have an education when they come into the country. It's a very small percentage.
Okay, I want to get to how we are. Are you finished reading yet? Because there's so many things we can talk about.
Almost. I'm almost done.
Okay.
All right. If you have convinced yourself that economic growth is not best left to market forces, but always requires government direction, it is easier to justify what might otherwise appear a crude attempt to bribe the regions to shut up about federal trade politics that benefit only central Canada, end quote. So it happened, according to Brimlow, that Canada acquired a hypertronic welfare state with a, quote, new class of politicians, civil servants, employees of the multiple crown corporations such as the CBC, welfare workers, teachers, journalists. And these opinion leaders were tributary to the liberal ideology which they had propagated as the true national vision and the new nationalism. Any other view was politically incorrect. The Liberals were defeated in 1984 and Brian Mulroney brought the Progressive Conservatives to power. But for Brimlow, this was again playing the same old Liberal game. Mulroney was from Quebec. He was perfectly bilingual, and Quebec's concerns were his priorities. He maintained and promoted the same old, quote, liberal ideology.
Okay. So now a couple of points here. One, we're talking about French versus English. Okay.
Or are we talking about English in all other languages?
I include.
Well, and also I know your focus, and you mentioned the immigrants who are you're saying are not learning either French or English.
They're not
how does this? How does the French English issue relate to the immigrant issue?
It proves that when you have more than at least one group of people speaking different languages, that it's already tense as it is. It already creates anxiety.
Well, we know
division.
that. We've been trying to have a country here for over 100 years, and we know how difficult it is.
140 years, actually.
And only the Liberals have been able to keep it together.
Well, they've been able to bribe Quebec.
Only
I'm just saying. I'm saying
together.
this. What I'm saying is this. You might call it a bribe, okay? You might call it realpolitik, right?
Realpolitik, yeah.
You may the way to keep the country together. The question is, if you start to go down some of these other roads that you're talking about, like it seems obvious to me, some of the roads that Stephen Harper is going down, then yeah, maybe you won't be able to keep all the linguistic groups happy in the country. But then what? We're going to lose the country.
Can we trust this man?
Like the thing is this, Sean. Are you willing to see the country break up? And then what happens when we have all these other people speaking other languages now, living in increasingly ghettoized communities?
That's already happening in Vancouver. When Jason Kenney
it's happening in Toronto.
Yeah, when Jason Kenney went to promote the Conservatives before the last election was finished, he went to downtown Toronto and he met a group of people down there. And he asked them what he can do for them, because that's what politicians do. They're trying to sell the party. Well, what can we do for you, right? And one of the gentlemen goes, why don't you guys make Urdu one of Canada's official languages? And he opened his eyes wide and he kind of reeled back. It was like, well, you know, I don't think I can do that or whatever. But in Vancouver, they want Mandarin and Cantonese to be Canada's third and fourth language. And because we never bothered defending the English language, the door's being opened to a segregated post-Ottoman Empire reality where we're all going to be on different pages. There's going to be no unity left. I mean, that's hopefully not going to be the reality, but you can see by encouraging these groups through, you know.
Sure, and I think I can agree with you that you know we don't need to have more than 2 official languages.
Yeah, it's bad enough
do we even need to?
But no, we don't actually. They only speak French.
We do.
We do.
We do, because if we don't have 2 official languages, we're not going to have the Canada that we know and love.
I completely disagree. I think that we should have 1 official language, which is English, and we should recognize that parts of New Brunswick and Quebec speak French. We should, you know, recognize that reality.
And Ontario and almost every province in the country. But the thing is, you start to adopt a policy like that, and I'm very suspicious that this guy right here is probably adopting a policy like that. You're going to, at some point, alienate Quebec, and we're going to lose Quebec.
They're already alienated as it is. And did you guys?
You know what?
You know what?
They're not all alienated,
and
they have voted every time to stay in the country.
For the
Sean.
Bloc, which is a breakaway party.
Okay, go.
Okay. That's baloney. I think that, you know what? No offense to you, but I think that if we went down to one language, I think it would be just fine. I think we might see a unity that we are not seeing.
Well, how? What's going to happen? How is Quebec going to react? How are French speaking Quebecers?
We're not going to force English on Quebec, Hugh. We're going to allow them. Like, we're not going to change. We're not going to change the. We should just take multiculturalism out of the charter. It's bad enough. I know French, and I barely use the language.
Taking multiculturalism out of the charter is a different issue than having one official language.
It threatens their culture. It basically says French is not a special language. That's why they're.
Okay,
feel,
if you
that's
have one official language, how do you think
special.
French-speaking Quebecers are going to feel?
Normal, because they're going to keep speaking French. There's signage laws making everything in that province. Well, it's not like we're going to impose English on them. Like, look at the trouble we've already had in the last couple decades. It's been crazy. Even at Thomas Mulcair, the NDP won 57 seats in the last election, all in Quebec. He barely won any seats outside. You know, and the Liberal Party's destroyed, and the Greens only have one seat. You know, Harper's poised to be the longest-running prime minister in history. Who else are you going to vote for? You know?
And I think we talked about this the last time you're here. Why can't we focus on what we have in common?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then celebrate our uniqueness.
Absolutely. So that means me not going to, you know, Carabana, Gay Pride, the South Asian Festival. I'm not in any of these tribes. I'm in the Canadian tribe. I was born in Canada, so I want to go to Canada Day. I want to celebrate Canada's birthday. I want to go to see sports that I'm familiar with: hockey, basketball, baseball. Those are things that I like. You know?
Yeah, but if somebody else wants to go to the Gay Pride parade, or somebody else wants to go to Carabana,
yeah, but I'm not going to go because I'm not a part of that.
Yeah, you don't have to go. You know? Nobody's forcing you to go now.
I've tried to go before, though. I have actually made the attempt to go to some of these things.
Well, you can go.
You know, I didn't feel like I belonged there. I felt alienated. I felt like it wasn't for me.
Maybe you should go through
that's how I feel about
the Clear Fear Forever process.
It's not a fear. They just let me know that I'm not part of their, quote, you know, community, and that's fine. I mean, you're not going to fit in everywhere you go.
That's often a perception.
It's, you know what, I think
that's often a perception, because I've gone to some of those events and not had a problem.
I'm a straight guy, so I don't fit in there. I'm not gay, so. People that are gay would feel comfortable there because it's for them. It's their parade, right? Okay, so and that's completely cool, right?
But you know what I think? I think that's a perfect example of where we can celebrate our commonness but our uniqueness. Because I know people who take their kids to these parades because they want to show the boats and the whatever you call those things that go along the street.
Yeah, but is it appropriate for family? Like some people have no pants in these things. Is that, you know, that's shocking.
You know, that becomes a moral issue.
It is, absolutely. I don't want to hang out with people that wear no pants. Like, none of my friends, they all walk around with pants on.
Which one are you talking about, Sean? Is it Carabana?
It's Gay Pride.
Gay Pride is over. I want to see some of those parades.
So anyways, this is why I talk about this issue, because it's taboo. We're not allowed to talk about it.
But you know what, that's your thing. So you don't want to go to something like that. Okay, so you're happy to be
But I've tried to, though. I made the attempt to.
Right, but
you
know
nobody
what?
stopped you from going, Sean.
You made the attempt, but I think you were really resistant.
Yeah.
I even went to Taste of Danforth. I bought a Slovaki, and then I left. I'm like, I looked around. There was music I didn't understand. There was... Okay, everyone was Greek. Like, I'm not Greek, so, you know.
That's your level.
And even if I was,
you know what? I'm half Greek and I don't understand.
Even if my parents were Greek, I wouldn't feel any connection to the country because I don't physically live there. I don't speak the language.
But it doesn't mean you can't appreciate the culture.
Yes, it does. I'm Canadian. I want to celebrate Canadian values and Canadian holidays.
So you know what?
That's great, and I want to do the same, Sean. But
you know what? I think what's going on here.
I don't like soccer either. You know, it's a European sport. It's not
is culture deprived. I think that's what's going on here. Because I think Canada, Sean feels left out because, you know, Carabana and all these people who come here, they have a culture that's more rich than the people who are born here.
It's only because ours isn't promoted, and we constantly apologize for it.
That's what I think.
You know, we've been brainwashed.
I think you're right too, Sean. But I think maybe you just need a hug.
That's
what Canadians do really well.
Do you mind if I read? Do you mind if I read the biography of Dr. Harveen Singh?
Sure.
Okay, he's a coordinator at UFT. Do you guys mind, or
no? Go ahead.
All right, Dr. Harveen Singh, coordinator. And then I'll read some excerpts from my unpublished book about Dr. Harveen Singh's comments, because he said something really...
Okay, sure.
Okay. Dr. Harveen Singh is an equity consultant in the educational sector. Harveen has over 10 years of research experience, 14 years of educational and community leadership experience, and extensive experience in equity programming and organizational development with universities, colleges, and high schools, and a foreign policy research think tank. She has been a consultant for educational leadership programs and organizational development strategies internationally, including the Institute of Education at the University of London, which is in the UK, and the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. With a PhD in Educational Administration from the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, or OISE, at UFT, Harveen uses an integrated approach to social justice, and educational programming. Her research interests include equity, leadership, student engagement, and deficit thinking, whatever that means, with particular emphasis on organizational learning.
Deficit thinking, that's what the liberals did for 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Hiring, retention, and promotion, teacher participation, faculty development, and policy and decision making. A central theme in her work, Harveen focuses on professional development and leadership programs that aim to equip current and aspiring educational leaders with the ethos, tools, and strategies to meet swiftly changing demographics and economic realities that are pertinent to school contexts. She is co-director of the leadership program Leading for Equity at the Centre for Leadership and Diversity at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. Leading for Equity is a program committed to the retention and advancement of Aboriginal and visible minority educators into positions of leadership. Harveen was also educational consultant and manager at the Mosaic Institute, Canada's only research think tank focused on harnessing Canada's diversity to inform foreign policy. In this position, she researched, designed, and implemented the South Asian Canadian Global Citizenship Project, which was lauded as school board-wide priorities by the two largest school boards in Canada, Toronto District School Board and the Peel District School Board. Before I continue, I want to explain to you guys that there was a lawsuit by a vice principal, of the Peel District School Board. And I was looking for the information before I came, but I just didn't have time to print it. But the lawsuit's before the court. She complained that there was an article in this week's paper, the South Asian Times, and they said 31% of the Peel region is visible minority from India and Pakistan.
Yes.
But only 2.1% of the teachers are visible minority out of the 237 teachers in the Peel region, or 5. There's a total of 5, right? 5 are vice principals.
So she's saying it should be 31%?
Well, she was passed over for promotion. So she's filing a complaint with the Human Rights Commission. But how can there be discrimination if there's already 5 vice principals and such a large percentage of these people living there from India and Pakistan have, poor linguistic skills? So if they did want to apply for a vice principal job, it's harder for them to do it because they can't communicate those skills in a 3-interview scenario, right?
Well, we don't know. Let's not presume that we can judge that case. Well, I'm sure the Human Rights Tribunal will do a splendid job. Well,
I got my research from there's like a Punjabi Community Health Center, and the gentleman there said, there was a person for a doctor who said, no one in Brampton speaks English, and the guy rose to the defense because this guy was from the Punjabi community. He was part of the doctor thing or whatever. He's a doctor of Punjabi descent. He said, those are blanket judgments, but in my own estimation, at least 25% of the residents are not even fluent in, quote, Punjabi. Like, he's on record as saying this in the South Asian Times paper. So they can barely even speak their own language fluently, let alone English.
So I think you actually raise a good point. It is about integration, though.
It is.
It really has to be.
And assimilation occurs on language acquisition. Yeah. Like, if you go to any country and you learn the language.
But I think it's not just about the language, though. It's about the acceptance of the culture, because language is just one aspect of that.
There's equality between men and women. There's subtle nuances. There's a politeness factor. Hello, please, goodbye, thank you. Those kinds of things. Those things are endearing.
And clothing, attire,
absolutely.
So I think it's one aspect.
It's a part of it. It's not the whole picture. Like, people will be hired for other reasons if they're qualified, but those things kind of make a difference.
So why does the globe okay, never mind. Please continue. We don't have a lot of time, Sean. We only got a couple of minutes, so please.
This project. Okay, I'll just read the passage from basically from my unedited book.
Okay.
Okay. And it's not that long.
Unedited?
Well, it's being edited now.
I understand.
Sharing rich traditions. This is from the South Asian Times paper. Oh, no, sorry, from the Weekly Voice newspaper.
Weekly Voice.
This was an excerpt.
Okay.
Sharing Rich Traditions is an annual gala dinner over which is hosted on May 20th at the Royal Banquet Hall in Mississauga. Provincial Parliamentarian Minister Glenn Murray encouraged citizens to share their stories in order to build bridges towards one another. This supposedly will build dignity and civility in Canadian society. And I'm like, doesn't celebrating differences cause division instead of unity? Dr. Sandy Kissoon Singh, co-chair of the group, doesn't think so. He wants to bring communities, and he never mentions that everyone is a Canadian, because that would be offensive, together in order to create a stronger, caring, more respectful Canada. Or he doesn't mention anything, what would you do to earn respect? Because respect shouldn't just be given to people. You should prove that you have some kind of,
So, you know what, Sean? Why don't you start an I Am Canadian parade?
I bounced an idea around it.
I think that's a great idea. I mean that in all seriousness.
I ran into walls. I ran into,
Good idea. Good idea.
According to Dr. Sandy, everyone should commit themselves to respecting one another and share responsibility and integrity as, quote, global citizens. What if you're born in Canada? That doesn't seem to matter now that everyone is a citizen of the world. There's simply no such thing as a Canadian citizen. Now that Canadians have become dehumanized by being completely stripped of their ethnicity, the assault on the majority can commence without delay. This was a quote from Dr. Harveen Singh. Wow. Dr. Harveen Singh of the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education for the University of Toronto, which is a very prestigious university apparently, according to most people's views, revealed that in the Toronto District School Board, 70% of the students were from visible communities, but 77% of the teachers were white Canadians, end quote. This was creating some, quote, root problems, including the lens through which the curriculum is taught. Dr. Singh advised, quote, that our youth must be cognitively and effectively internalize their curriculum using their own life experiences and schema if they are to succeed, end quote. In other words, they need non-white teachers, which is what Dr. Harveen Singh is trying to say in a politically correct word. That's exactly what it means. Dr. Singh was confident in saying that these problems must be remedied soon if we want to nurture our students and see them grow into adults who contribute positively in our 21st century societies, end quote. So I made a commentary here, and I've got statistics to kind of disprove this. Didn't Dr. Harveen Singh mention that Canadians should be respecting one another and sharing responsibilities and integrity as, quote, global citizens? Right? Because that's what Dr. Harveen said. Minister Glenn Murray is a white politician. How did he feel about sitting through Dr. Harveen Singh's racist lecture? He's mining ethnic votes, so Glenn probably doesn't give a shit about integrity. Canada is 84% Anglo-Saxon white nation. There's nothing wrong with being white. Dr. Harveen Singh can go pack her bags and move to India, where she doesn't have to be around the horrible white Canadians anymore. If 77% of the teachers are white, then that means 23% of the rest are not. Canada has a foreign-born population of between 17 and 20%. Around 6.5 million citizens are born outside Canada. The non-white teachers are more than fairly represented. It doesn't help that 45% of Canada's source countries are from failed states. In countries such as Iran and Pakistan, there are no institutions to help facilitate a lifelong educational foundation. The governments are all military dictatorships, and the press is tightly controlled by the state. If a Canadian moved to China or India and started demanding a white teacher, that would be racist. Dr. Harveen Singh is a racist, pure and simple. Maybe she has a problem and can positively inform the loyal readers of the Weekly Voice newspaper and the public at large exactly why it's a problem for white people to be in the teaching profession in Canada. They were obviously assessed by professionals and deemed more than fit to handle the tough job of helping to educate Canadian children. If Dr. Harveen Singh doesn't like the fact that Canada is a majority white country, she can always move to the United States. Over there, people all merge to become American citizens. Maybe over there, Dr. Harveen will realize that the color of a person's skin matters little, and it's the content of their character that is front and center. I think Dr. King said that. That's actually. Right. Yep. God bless him. Yep. There are other traitors operating in Canada's higher educational institutions. It's absolutely amazing that Dr. Harveen Singh and her racist views are allowed to be perpetuated openly at a highly regarded educational institution such as the University of Toronto.
Yes, Sean. That makes sense.
You know what?
Okay. What?
You bring up one really good point. I know we have to move on, but thank you for following your excitement. Because
he's obviously excited. You're excited, Sean, and it shows. And you're passionate about this stuff.
You raise a really good point. People who come to Canada are coming because they're not happy in their place.
They're following their excitement.
Well, no, I think they're doing it. A lot of them are doing it of desperation. I don't think they can get to that point of excitement
if you're in Iran or Pakistan and the country's falling apart, you want to go somewhere else.
Iran's not so bad.
Yeah, but if it is bad enough for you to want to leave the country and your family and everything else. So maybe for everybody, but people who come here, are coming here for a reason. So why is it they're trying to bring the problem here?
Because we don't encourage them to.
And
I think we've done a bad job as a country of saying this is our culture. We're okay with it.
Here it is.
Like we welcome you.
And come on in and join us.
Yeah, we welcome you, and we want to take the good from where you're coming. But you know what? You're coming here because there's not a lot of good where you're coming from. So you're trying to find good, right? So why can't it be seen as that instead of them coming in and trying to push some of the bad?
As I said in early episodes, we should give each new Canadian a book of Canadian history, or 2 or 3 books, so that they understand where this conversation originated from, the good and the bad, just everything.
Sean, the point I just want to kind of leave, I'll let you make the very final thing, but the thing I want to say is, despite what Harper's doing, like to me what bugs me, although you said that he's made some effort to try to deal with this problem a little bit better. But all I see, he's going around making international agreements. He's spending time dealing in the international community. He's not really dealing with the domestic situation here in Canada at all. And he's signing agreements that are taking away our sovereignty. And And next thing you know, all the decisions are going to be made offshore. Like you talk about a problem with us being proud of our country, and it seems to me it's a global movement to take away power from citizens, to remove democratic institutions, not just from Canada, but from the U.S., from everywhere.
Europe's experiencing
globalized corporatism is running rampant, and that's the real problem here. And so the high immigration strategy that the Globe and Mail recommends,
100 million people,
is to take away any kind of opportunity for us to have a homogenous approach, unified approach that we're going to manage our own affairs.
Well, the bad news is Thomas Mulcair was the head of the Quebec City Liberals, and now he's running. That's why Quebec voted for him. They threw in the towel on the Liberals because of the scandals. And
Sean. Okay, final word. Can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you going to have more? Are these books going to be available?
Contact Sean for supporting the I Am Canadian parade.
Sure. Sean, how do people get in touch with you?
They can email me at sean@endofees.ca, or they can phone me
at... people in the studio already said they'd go.
416-557-5666. That's my landline, and I'm open to phone calls if you want to talk about this issue, because I'm working on a book about it. And
awesome. Okay, so, Sean@endofees.ca.
Absolutely.
You know what we're going to play right now? Just I got a video here that's going to, it's number 4 there, Randy. This is about America, but I think the same thing can apply to us, maybe more or less the circumstance. We're going to watch this. We're going to come back with Val Shearman, talk about the Superstars contest as Liquid Lunch continues on Friday the 13th. We'll be right back.
All right, it is the 13th.
Can you say why America is the greatest country in the world?
Diversity and opportunity.
Lewis? Freedom and freedom. So let's keep it that way.
Well, why is America
not the greatest country in the world, Professor? That's my answer.
You're saying...
Yes.
Let's talk about...
Fine. Sharon, the NEA is a loser. Yeah, it accounts for a penny out of our paycheck, but he gets to hit you with it anytime he wants. It doesn't cost money. It costs votes. It costs airtime and column inches. You know why people don't like liberals? Because they lose. If liberals are so fucking smart, how come they lose so goddamn always?
Hey.
And with a straight face, you're going to tell students that America is so star-spangled awesome that we're the only ones in the world who have freedom? Canada has freedom. Japan has freedom. The UK, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Australia, Belgium has freedom. So 207 sovereign states in the world, like 180 of them have freedom.
All right.
And yeah, you, sorority girl, just in case you accidentally wander into a voting booth one day, there's some things you should know. And one of them is, there is absolutely no evidence to support the statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, number 4 in labor force, and number 4 in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories: number of incarcerated citizens per capita.